Okay, hi everyone. So in this short tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to make this landscape that I used for the CNC exercise. It's really just another simple form of data visualization that you can do in Blender, and you can think of it alongside what we did with looking at weather data in class. Okay, so starting with the same file, I'll just hide what I was doing before. Actually, I'll really quickly show you how it works. Basically, if I hide the final one, we're making a landscape displacement. So I'm using modifiers here to subdivide a plane, and then I'm using a map that I'm going to download from online that's going to drive the height of these mountains. So if I do this, the mountains will get higher and so on. Okay, but let's build this together. So I'll just turn off everything in my scene, and I'll put my render engine back to Eevee, so I'm not doing the CNC calculation now, I'm just working in regular Blender. And first of all, I'm going to add a plane. And I'll check my size by pressing N, looking at the item. I'll make it 100 millimeters either way, so it's 10 centimeters across, and I'll put it in the middle of my scene. Okay, so now we're going to need to get that data. If you go to the website tangrams.github.io/heightmapper, you will, I'll see if I can put that link in the description, you'll get this. And if you zoom in, you'll see kind of this black and white map of the world. Put simply, what we're looking at is black represents like an elevation of 0, like sea level. And anything lighter than that represents height, going up. So, it's pretty cool. We can see like glaciers and Arctic tundra and mountain ranges, and really like the boundaries of geographical of plates and so on. But okay, zooming in here, it's a bit hard to find what you're looking for, so you can just turn on the lines and the labels and you can zoom in, and I'll just grab that same data of Hong Kong. So if I zoom right in, here we're looking at roughly where we are here, and then this is the data that I want to use. So I'll turn off my labels again because I don't want that to appear in my download, and I'll just give it a name, and I'll call it HK_3, and then I'll just click render, and it'll just say how big it's going to be. I'll click OK, and it's going to fly around a bit and give me the best resolution data on that area. I'll click OK, and now that file's in my downloads. So I'll just quickly copy that, pop it in my teaching folder, in my textures folder. There we go, HK3, there it is. And just to make things easier, I'm actually going to crop it into a square. We could do our UV mapping a little differently in Blender, but to me it's quickest and easiest if I just shift select, make sure I've got a square aspect ratio. I'll get it about the height of my image. You could do this in Photoshop more precisely, of course, right? Set a precise pixel dimension, but I'm just keeping this really simple. I'm just going to put this sort of in the middle there, then I'll press Command K to just crop it, and then I'll save it. You can, if you want to keep the original in your downloads, and just in case you don't want to crop it, do what you want to do. But all right, there's my square image saved as HK3. So I'll close that, and I'll go back to Blender, and now all I need to do is add a couple of modifiers. So first of all, I'm going to add in the modifiers panel here a subdivision surface modifier, and I'll set that to simple. And what simple does is it's just going to slice and add extra faces, edges, and vertices. I'm going to duplicate that because we're going to be turning this up a bit later on. And then I'm going to add one more thing called a displacement modifier. Now, you can do a lot of this in geometry nodes now with much more sophistication, but I'm just keeping it really simple by sticking with the modifiers here. So this displacement, at the moment, it's not doing anything other than moving my plane up and down in the air. And that's just because we're not putting any information into the displacement. So if I click New and I go into the settings, we can add in an image or anything. So for example, if I click one of these noise generators like Voronoi, immediately it might start looking a little bit strange. But if I start to now turn up the resolution on my subdivisions, we'll see that the information, the black and white information in the Voronoi texture is affecting our mesh. Now, a word of warning, don't turn these up too high. You know, 3 and 3 is already quite high. Just go very slowly, because the higher you turn this up, you do risk crashing your computer, because you're forcing Blender to exponentially increase the number of faces it's trying to render on your screen. Okay, so if I just go back to this Voronoi, I can play around with it. Say I, even actually leaving it at that size, if I just turn the strength down to like 0.01, I've made this nice, like, sort of ripply wave kind of texture, which we could CNC mill this. It could look kind of interesting. Remember that we can't CNC things that have an overhang, but something like this I think would actually work really well. If we wanted a little more detail, I could carefully turn up my modifiers, and then we'd be getting it kind of smooth. And I could play around with my Voronoi and, you know, change the size. If I change that, we'll have smaller ripples, and if I change the size higher, we'd have larger ripples. And then you could, you know, have a look through all of these, and you get a different effect every time. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to cancel this, and I'm going to make an image. So now I'm going to open that image that we cropped in my textures folder, HK3, open that image up. Okay, so now we're getting, instead of the Voronoi texture, we're getting that height data come in. We don't really need to do too much here. I'm going to make sure it's looking on my UVs, and that will just give me the ability to look at the UV map of my plane in case I want to, you know, change anything around. And if I go out of edit mode, now to have the exact height, I'm not actually sure what the numbers would be, because they kind of depend on the size of your plane relative to the displacement. So I actually kind of do this by eyeball, and but if we had a reference point, we could work it out. You know, if we know, okay, what's the height of Lion Rock from sea level, we could just add in an object and calibrate it more cleanly. And I'm pretty sure if, you know, if this plane had a more standard relationship to the size of the area we're working with, I'm guessing there is a mathematical correlation between the darkest sea level and the height of these grays for the mountains. But I'm just going to do this by eye. Something like that I think looks probably about right, 0.02. So that should be like Lion Rock, Beacon Hill, and coming around to Kowloon Peak here. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So we're almost there. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to rename this and call it Mountain. My caps lock's on. Mountain Modifiers. And I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'll prepare it for, you know, if I wanted to 3D print it or mill it. So I'm just going to hit Shift D, duplicate it, and I'll call this one Mountain Applied. Okay, so therefore, as the name would suggest, I'm going to apply the modifiers on this one, and I'll keep this one hidden in case I want to go back and change anything. So this is almost there. The only issue is that right now it has no thickness, and it's got these bits that poke up right at the end, which won't be much use to us. So what we can do is, there's a few ways to do this. You could do this with vertex groups, or you can just select like a few rows. I'm just going to try the selecting a few rows bit. So I'm just using a keyboard shortcut of like Shift Option Click to select the whole rows like that. And I'm just going to put these at a scale of 0, and that should fix this up. So I'm holding down Shift and Option to just grab maybe 2 rows, because I just want to have a little sort of, oops, not that one, Shift Option, that one, that's good. I just want to have a flat border. Shift Option Click and Shift Option, nope, not that one, click, perfect. All right, so now we've got that border. If I press S for scale, Z 0, now that's flattened them out. And that's just giving us like something, I think, a little bit more practical to work with. What did I do in the rest of this? I think I just grabbed the edges. I just wanted to sort of make a block out of it. So I think I just went something like go onto the edge and Shift Command click, no, Shift Option, Shift Control. Which one gives me my edge loop? I always forget this stuff. Keyboard shortcuts for edge loop. Okay, hold on, maybe I'll just do one row at a time because I can't remember the right shortcut. Okay, Shift Option click, Shift Option click, Shift Option click, and Shift Option click should be good. Okay, now I'm just going to extrude down EZ and make sure that Z is clicked so that we're not going off. So just tap Z to make sure you're going down. Something like that is okay. And then if I think right click, I want a grid fill, or maybe I go mesh, grid fill, there we are, face grid fill, and that's just filled it in with the same topology as the rest of the mesh. So something like that should be good to go. It might need further cleaning, but maybe not. I think as long as it's got that border, then we're not going to have like little bits floating off the side. You can always grab a few extra rows and scale in, but something like that I think will work fine. Then I'll just apply the scale, and then at the start of the CNC video I show you how to sort of, you know, reposition it into the positive X and positive Y, and, you know, make sure that you're below the zero and all of that other stuff, but that's in the other tutorial. So I'll finish this one here, and yeah, if you're interested in making topographical sort of sculptures, then this is a simple way to get started. Okay, bye-bye.